Transform Blazing Sword!
Voltron, Defender of the Universe.
In 1998, the last licensed Voltron toy left the shelf. No announcement, no farewell, just empty pegs where the Black Lion used to be. At its height, Voltron had moved hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise. It had dominated afternoon television across the United States. It had built something rare, a piece of children's entertainment that felt, to the kids watching it, like it actually mattered. Like it was built for them specifically. And then it was gone. Not canceled in one dramatic moment. Not killed by controversy or scandal. It simply stopped being viable, and the machinery that had built it quietly moved on. What's worth understanding is that Voltron almost didn't exist at all. The version that reached American living rooms in 1984 was assembled, hastily, legally, and under significant constraint, from Japanese footage that was never intended to become what it became. The people who put it together did not fully anticipate what they were creating, and the thing they created carried, from its very first frame, a structural flaw that would eventually determine exactly how it ended. That flaw was built into the design, not into the story, into the machine itself.
Time to split up, team. Lance, Hunk, you both stick with me.
The Rise. Why it worked. World Events Company acquired the rights to a Japanese animated series called Beast King Go Lion in 1983. The original show was dense, violent, and emotionally serious by the standards of its time. Characters died. Grief was shown on screen. The consequences of war were not softened for younger viewers. When World Events brought the footage to the United States, significant edits were made. Scenes were cut. Death was minimized. Dialogue was rewritten. The result was a show that was, on the surface, safer than its source material. But something survived the translation. The architecture of the story remained intact. 5 pilots, 5 mechanical lions, a distant planet under siege. A team that could only win by combining, not just their machines, but their trust in each other. That premise was structurally sound in a way that a lot of its competition was not. The stakes felt real, even when the edges had been smoothed. American children in 1984 had options. He-Man had been running for 2 years and had established that fantasy action could hold a mass audience. Transformers and G.I. Joe were arriving in the same season, both backed by toy companies that had architected the shows specifically around their product lines. The afternoon animation block was crowded and competitive, and every show in it was fighting for the same 90 minutes of post-school attention. Voltron entered that market and found an audience immediately. And the reason why is worth being precise about. The competing shows had protagonists who were essentially invincible. He-Man could not be stopped. The Autobots could absorb enormous damage and keep moving. G.I. Joe almost never lost a member. These were power fantasies, and they worked as power fantasies. But they created a particular dramatic ceiling. If the hero cannot meaningfully fail, the question is not whether they will win, it's only how. There is no suspense in inevitability. There is only the pleasure of watching the outcome arrive. Voltron's premise was structurally different, and it worked because of the weight of the machine itself. Voltron stood 60 meters tall, 200 feet. It weighed 250 metric tons. Those numbers meant nothing to the children watching, but the scale communicated itself visually in every episode. When Voltron formed, you felt the combination sequence, 5 lions locking into a single frame, was not just an animation shortcut. It was the emotional climax of every episode that used it. The Black Lion formed the body and head. The red and green lions became the arms. The blue and yellow lions became the legs. The sequence was the same nearly every time, and nearly every time, it worked. Repetition in children's television is not a flaw. It is the mechanism of attachment. The audience learned the sequence, anticipated it, and received it as a reward. Each formation was a confirmation that the team had survived long enough to combine, that the threat was serious enough to require it, and that the individual pilots had trusted each other enough to make it possible. The 5 pilots were not interchangeable. They had defined roles, defined personalities, and a defined hierarchy. Keith led from the Black Lion. Lance pushed boundaries from the red. Pidge operated with precision from the green. Hunk held the line from the yellow. Princess Allura piloted the blue. Each pilot controlled their own cockpit independently. Each lion had its own propulsion systems, its own combat capabilities, its own energy reserves. The show understood something that a lot of its competition missed. The individual units had to matter. If the lions were just components, interchangeable parts that happened to be shaped like animals, then combination was only engineering, a logistical step on the way to the real fight. But because each lion was capable, and because each pilot was distinct, the act of combining was a choice. 5 people deciding, under fire, to trust each other enough to become something neither of them could be alone. That is not engineering. That is the entire premise of the show. And choices, unlike mechanisms, carry weight. By the end of 1984, Voltron was the most watched children's animated program in the United States. That success created pressure, and pressure in the entertainment industry always moves in one direction.
Prisoners? Why is he showing them off?
The peak, when it almost broke. The success of Voltron, Defender of the Universe, generated an immediate commercial imperative: toys, licensing, sequels, expansion. World Events had originally licensed 2 separate Japanese series, Go Lion and Die Rugger 15, and combined them under the Voltron name. The second series featured a 15-vehicle combination rather than 5 lions. It was marketed as Voltron Vehicle Force. It aired. It found a smaller audience. It did not replicate what the lion-based series had done. That failure was instructive. It confirmed that what the audience had attached to was specific, not the Voltron concept in the abstract. The 5 lions, the 5 pilots, that particular team, that particular machine. When the original lion-based footage ran out, new episodes were commissioned. Voltron, Defender of the Universe, continued into original American production. The quality changed. The tonal consistency that had survived the Go Lion translation began to drift. The show became more episodic, less architecturally coherent. The stakes that had made the original run feel serious were gradually replaced with formula. And here is where the structural flaw becomes relevant. The machine's greatest tactical strength, the combination of 5 independent units into a single platform, was also its most significant point of failure. The technical specification is precise on this point. If any single lion was incapacitated, the formation sequence could not be initiated. If any pilot was separated, compromised, or prevented from reaching the rendezvous point, Voltron could not form. The ultimate weapon required all 5 components to be fully operational simultaneously, a single point of failure across 5 independent systems. In the early run, this vulnerability was used deliberately. Enemies who understood the weakness would target the smallest lion first, or attempt to separate the team before the battle reached its critical phase. The threat of failed combination was real, and the show made you feel it. There was a specific dread in watching a pilot go down in the second act, because the audience understood exactly what that meant for the third. The combination sequence, usually a moment of triumph, carried weight precisely because it was sometimes not available. The writers understood this and used it sparingly. The threat had to be credible, but not constant. If every episode withheld the combination until the last possible moment, the formula would simply invert. The skill was in calibrating when to withhold and when to deliver, so that delivery never felt automatic. When a roe beast appeared and the lions struggled to reach each other across a battlefield, the audience was not simply watching action. They were watching the premise itself under stress. But as the show extended beyond its source material, this tension became harder to sustain. The formula demanded combination. The audience expected combination. And so combination became guaranteed rather than earned. The flaw in the machine became invisible because the writers stopped acknowledging it. That decision, to make Voltron's formation inevitable rather than contested, removed the central dramatic engine from the show. The question that should hang here is simple. If the combination was no longer in doubt, what was the story actually about?
I did it, Tao, didn't I?
The fall. Structural, not personal. The collapse of Voltron's cultural dominance was not sudden. It was sequential. The toy market shifted in the late 1980s in ways that were difficult to reverse. The die-cast metal construction that had made the original Voltron toys feel substantial and expensive became a liability as plastic-dominant competitors drove prices down. The retail economics of a premium-priced combiner toy worked in 1984, when the market was less crowded and the show was delivering daily. By 1987, the shelf space that Voltron had once owned was being contested by properties with fresher momentum. The economics of afternoon animation changed at the same time. Syndication models that had funded the first wave of toy-driven cartoons were being renegotiated. Shows that didn't perform in their first run had fewer paths to revenue. Voltron had performed spectacularly for a time, but the window between peak performance and commercial irrelevance was shorter than anyone involved had anticipated. Licensing revenue depended on novelty, and novelty required either continuation or reinvention. Voltron attempted both at different points and achieved neither fully. The continuation extended a premise that had already been structurally exhausted. The reinvention, when it arrived, came too late and in the wrong form. A 1998 continuation, Voltron: The Third Dimension, used early computer-generated imagery and returned to the original lion-based team. The production technology of the period had specific visible limitations: rigid movement, flat lighting, a visual texture that read as unfamiliar to an audience that had grown up with the hand-drawn animation of the original. The show aired on Cartoon Network. It ran for 2 seasons. It ended. It did not recover what had been lost. But the honest assessment is that the CGI was not the primary problem. Reboot, Beast Wars, and Reboot had all demonstrated by then that computer-generated children's animation could find loyal audiences. The issue with The Third Dimension was not the medium. It was that the show was attempting to revive a premise without addressing the reason the original premise had stopped working. The combination sequences were still guaranteed. The structural flaw was still unacknowledged. The drama of 5 independent pilots having to earn the right to become one machine was still absent. What had been lost was not really the animation style. It was the structural integrity of the premise. The show had been built on a tension that it eventually stopped honoring: the idea that 5 independent units, each necessary, each vulnerable, had to earn the right to become something greater. When that tension was abandoned in favor of formula, the machine kept running, but the engine was gone. The verdict here is not complicated. Voltron did not fall because of bad decisions made by careless people. It fell because the instinct that drove its rise, give the audience what they came for, every time, reliably, became the mechanism of its erosion. Reliability replaced suspense. Expectation replaced anticipation. And a story built on the drama of combination became a show where combination was simply what happened at the end. The same logic that built the audience destroyed what the audience had come to see.
If he needs our help, he's got it. Right, team? Right!
The aftermath. What was lost? The blazing sword, Voltron's primary weapon, was a plasma blade generated by channeling quintessence energy through a linear magnetic field projector. The blade's intensity could be modulated. Its size could be adjusted. It was not a fixed weapon. It was a responsive one. That detail appears in the technical record and nowhere in the cultural memory of the show. Most people who watched Voltron as children remember the sword appearing in the final act. They remember it being raised. Do not remember that it was adjustable, that the weapon was designed to meet the specific scale of the threat rather than to deliver a fixed, predetermined response. That distinction is worth sitting with because it describes something larger than a weapon specification. The blazing sword was built to be proportional. The show, in its decline, was not. It delivered the same response: combination, sword, victory, regardless of what the threat actually required. The weapon was designed for nuance. The stories stopped using it that way. The 5 Lions had independent propulsion systems capable of atmospheric and deep space operation. The power source, quintessence, was not simply fuel, but a concentrated exotic energy with properties that the show gestured at without fully exploring. There are references in the technical record to quintessence behaving differently depending on the emotional state of the pilots channeling it, a detail that, had it been dramatized, would have made the relationship between the team's internal dynamics and the machine's actual combat effectiveness explicit. The connection between trust and power, between cohesion and capability, was built into the physics of the thing. It was never made into a story. The combination sequence itself may have involved localized spatial compression fields to achieve the rapid structural consolidation at that scale. The transitional moment, when the 5 Lions were neither independent nor fully merged, was described in some technical documents as the system's most vulnerable phase. Not because the Lions were separated, but because they were committed to a transformation they could not reverse mid-sequence. That window was the real danger, and it was the one the show stopped dramatizing once combination became routine. None of that was ever used in a way that mattered. What was lost was not the show's end. What was lost was the version of the show that might have honored the complexity of what had been designed, that might have built stories around the real vulnerabilities of the system, the real cost of combination, The real stakes of 5 independent pilots trusting each other enough to become one machine. That version was always available. It was always structurally present in the premise. It was never made.
Form Blazing Sword!
Final beat. The lasting question. There is a question embedded in the original design of Voltron that no version of the show ever fully answered. The machine required 5 pilots. Each controlled an independent lion. Each lion was capable on its own, armed, mobile, dangerous. But the 5 together could do what none of them could do alone. The combination was more than the sum of its parts. What the show never seriously examined was the cost of that dependency. Not just tactically, the vulnerability during formation, the risk of a single incapacitated unit, but personally. What does it mean to be necessary? What does it mean to hold in your hands the ability to prevent something greater from existing? The show built a machine defined by mutual dependency and then largely avoided what that dependency would feel like from the inside. That question didn't disappear when the show ended. It just went unanswered. If the space between what something was designed to be and what it actually became is the kind of thing you find yourself thinking about, subscribing means you won't miss what we look at next.